Picture this: a man stands alone in the cold autumn rain of northern France. His boots are sinking into the mud. Not soft mud, but thick, sucking, corpse-colored sludge that clings like hands trying to drag him down. His name is Henry, King Henry V. His armor is dented, his hair matted with sweat. His face is gaunt, hollow, carved by weeks of starvation. And yet he's smiling. Not because he's winning, but because he's alive. Behind him stretch the remnants of an army that shouldn't exist. Sick men, wounded men, barefoot men. Men injured so severe they can barely stand. An army of ghosts, marching through France towards the sea. In front of him, though not yet visible through the morning fog, waits the largest force the French crown has assembled in a century. A wall of steel, horses, banners, and noble arrogance. A tidal wave ready to crush the starving English against the earth. This is 1415, and the 100 Years' War has become a graveyard for kings. But before we reach the field of Agincourt, before the slaughter, the trapping, the mud-choked death, you have to understand why Henry is smiling. Because in this moment, on this cold October dawn, every gambler on earth would bet against him, and he knows it. Henry's army, originally over 11,000 strong, has rotted away down to maybe 6,000. Disease has done what French steel couldn't. Men are collapsing mid-march. Bodies are thrown into roadside ditches with no prayers. Knights who once boasted of honor now wipe themselves with leaves because they've run out of cloth. The English don't march for France. They flee through it. After barely capturing Harfleur, a siege so diseased that 1/3 of his army died, King Henry had exactly one option: march to Calais and get out of France alive. But France is not stupid. France is furious. The French lords view Henry as a child playing war. Worse, a foreigner. When they hear Henry is marching north with half an army and no supplies, they laugh, they brag, and they sharpen their swords. And then they send word across the kingdom: assemble everything, every knight, every squire, every armed noble. We will crush this English boy on the road. Henry hopes to march fast enough to avoid confrontation, but the French block every crossing, every ford, and every bridge. And then Henry reaches the Somme River. Every crossing is held by French knights, and every path to Calais is sealed. Henry becomes cornered. He tries detours, long, miserable loops across muddy fields. His men trudge through rivers up to their waists. The armor is rusting and the food is running out. When the English finally find a crossing the French haven't fortified, it comes at a cost. A village burns, and civilians flee. The English seize whatever bread, barley, or livestock they can find. Henry apologizes to the priest, but he does it anyway. War allows no saints. On October 24th, the English reach a small village called Agincourt. It's quiet, too quiet. The ground squeals beneath the soldiers' feet. The fields are thick with mud, churned by recent rain. On either side of the narrow clearing lie two dense forests, Tramcourt and Azur. It's a perfect kill zone, not for the English, but for the French. King Henry sees it immediately. His captains beg him to avoid fighting here, but behind them the French army is closing in with overwhelming numbers. King Henry nods once. "This is where we stand." The French arrive, and you hear them before you see them. The drums, the trumpets, the snorting of war horses, and the metallic thunder of plate armor. French knights, thousands of them, march into view. They are armored like walking fortresses, shining even in the fog. This is the pride of France, the greatest cavalry in Europe. Men who train since childhood to ride down peasants like wheat. By contrast, Henry's men look like scarecrows. Their gambesons are torn, their helmets dented. Some archers fight with rags wrapped around their bleeding feet. But here's the danger, the fatal flaw the French can't see. They think armor wins battles, but Henry knows terrain does. At dusk, Henry walks among his men. You picture him, a king with mud splattered up to his knees, his sword belt loose because he's lost so much weight, his voice hoarse from infection. He tells stories, He lifts spirits, and he touches shoulders and grips their hands. These men are not fighting for conquest anymore. They're fighting for survival, for each other, for the slim hope of going home. And meanwhile, the French drink wine in their pavilion tents. They argue about who gets to take Henry prisoner, not if they win, but who gets the honor. Some nobles complain that they might not get a chance to fight at all, that the vanguard might take all the glory. They view tomorrow as a parade. But they have no idea the mud will betray them, that their armor will become coffins, and that the English longbow, twisted yew, horn, and sinew, is about to carve the flower of French nobility into the earth. The sun rises weakly behind a veil of fog. Henry forms his line. 6,000 English men. Across the field, the fog hides a monster. 20 to 30,000 French. They're outnumbered 5 to 1. You glance down and see the mud clutching at your boots. You look up and see the French unfolding across the horizon. And then, Henry raises his helmet. He mounts his horse, and he smiles, that same unsettling smile. Not because he expects to live, but because for one moment the entire world is balanced on a knife's edge, and he's the one holding on to it. Dawn doesn't break, so as much as leak. A pale, colorless light seeps into the sky over Agincourt. The fog hangs low, clinging to the ground like a second skin. Men cough, horses snort, and armor creaks. On the English side of the field, there is no grandeur, just lines. 3 rough blocks of men-at-arms in the center, knights and soldiers fighting mostly on foot, and on each flank, like wings, the archers. Most of them wear no plate, just leather and padded jackets. Their power is not in armor, it's in their backs and shoulders, warped by years of drawing a 150-pound bow. You stand among them. The yew bow in your hand is taller than you are. Your fingers are wrapped in hide. Your muscles already ache, but you know deep down that before this day is done, you will shoot hundreds of arrows, or you'll be dead. Henry's line is tight, compressed, set deep in the narrow gap between the two forests. He's chosen his position with ruthless simplicity. If he can't outnumber them, then he's going to outthink them. Across the field, the French army unfolds like a banner. They are arranged in 3 main battle lines. At the front, a dense wall of men-at-arms on foot, packed shoulder to shoulder, thousands of them. Behind them, another mass, more heavily armed, more impatient, and flanking, and behind, the cavalry, the mounted nobility of France, sitting restless on their war horses. Names move through the ranks. Constable Charles d'Albret, Duke of Orleans, and Duke of Bourbon. Princes, dukes, counts, lords with estates larger than entire English counties. They are the pride of France. They are also about to suffocate in their own armor, but they don't know it yet. Right now, they only know this: the English are outnumbered, and badly. So they wait. They expect Henry to do the sensible thing and beg. Maybe for a truce, maybe for terms, or maybe for permission to retreat. But Henry does nothing. The waiting game. Hours pass, the French don't advance. Why would they? They have the numbers. They have the food. They can stand here and let the English rot on the spot. King Henry watches the French line, his face unreadable. His captains murmur. The men shift uncomfortably, knees aching and stomachs empty. If they stand still long enough, they'll grow weaker with every hour. You can feel the tension like a physical pressure in your chest. If nothing happens, you die slowly. If something happens, you might die quickly. At last, King Henry makes a decision. He does something insane. He orders the entire English army to move forward. Not a charge, not a mad dash. A march. The English line lurches forward, men-at-arms in the center, archers on the wings, banners swaying in the damp air. Every step is difficult. The mud at Agincourt is not just wet, it's saturated. Days of rain. Thousands of hooves and wagon wheels have transformed this freshly plowed clay into a sucking morass. Your boots sink, the mud pulls at your ankles trying to hold you in place. Still, the line moves. You march until Henry is satisfied, until you are well within longbow range. Then the signal comes. Halt. Plant stakes. The archers ram sharpened wooden stakes into the ground at an angle, pointing outward toward the French lines, a jagged wall of spikes. They learned this trick from Scotland, from fields where English cavalry once died. Now, the English bowmen use it to make sure they can't be ridden down. When the last of the stakes is in place, you step back, bow in hand, breath visible in the cold air. The field is now smaller. The gap has shrunk. King Henry has forced the French to fight closer, tighter, and more constrained, and they don't like that. The English don't wait for a formal invitation. Somewhere down the line, a commander shouts, and the first arrows rise. You pull the bowstring back to your ear. The wood groans and creaks, and your shoulder aches, and then you let go. The arrow vanishes upward, a blur of feathers and ash shaft. Then thousands more join it. An entire line of archer releases. The sky fills with black streaks, and for a heartbeat, the field is quiet. Then, on the far side, the arrows begin to fall. They hammer into armor, helmets, horses, and flesh. French banners waver as men cry out, stumble, clutch at shafts embedded in the shoulders, necks, and faces. Longbows cannot reliably punch through the thickest plate, but not everyone is wearing the best steel. The joints are exposed and the visors are open, and the horses are not fully armored. And even if most arrows glance off plate, some do not. And even a glance hit hurts. They demoralize, and they make ranks shuffle, shift, and tighten. The French nobles stare in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. They expected English pleas, not English defiance. The archers let loose again, and again, and again. The French have a choice now. Advance through the arrow storm, or stand in place and let it carve them apart. The French response is predictable. Infuriated by the barrage, shamed by English boldness, the French cavalry on the flanks can't stand still any longer. They push forward. Hooves churn the mud, banners snap, and visors slam shut. Cavalry was meant to be the hammer of medieval warfare, living thunder, unstoppable, beautiful, and terrible. But Agincourt, the field itself, betrays them. The ground has been plowed, rain has turned it to soup, and in this narrow corridor between two forests there is no room to fan out, no room to maneuver. The horses plunge forward anyway. You watch them come. Heavy destriers, nostrils flaring, armor chatting like pots and pans. The archers knock and draw. Arrows fly. Horses are far taller than men. Their chests are broad, their bellies vast targets. Arrows slam into the horses. A mount goes down, its legs shattering, throwing its armored rider forward like a stone. The knight crashes face first into the mud, the weight of his armor driving him down into the wet earth. He struggles, but his hands find no purchase. He's not a warrior anymore. He's a man drowning on land. All along the line it happens again and again. Horses stumble into deep hoofprints. Twisted ankles crash into one another. The charge that should have been a focused spear point turns into a chaotic, flailing swarm. Some riders make it to the English stakes. Their horses hit a wall of sharpened wood at full speed. A stake punches up into the chest, another drives into a horse's throat. Animals rear and thrash, impaled and screaming. Riders sail off saddles, land hard in front of the English line, stunned, dazed, and dragged down by the weight of their harness. Archers drop bows, draw hatchets and mallets and fall upon them. This is not noble combat. This is slaughter. The French cavalry meant to sweep the archers from the field. Slows, stalls, disappear into the tangle of floundering horses and dying men. Behind them, the vanguard of dismounted men at arms begin to advance. They are heavily armored from head to toe, impressive and terrible in their density. It should be unstoppable, but to get to the English line, they must cross the same churned mud, now even worse, chewed up by panicked horses, slick with blood and littered with bodies. You imagine it under your boots. Every step sinks to its ankles, sometimes the calves, and sometimes when you misstep into a hoof hole or rut, it goes to the knee. Now picture it in full plate armor, hundreds of pounds of steel on your body, a helmet restricting your breath, a visor limiting your vision. You march anyway because you have to. There's no room to spread out. The men behind push those in front forward whether they want to move or not. The French vanguard compresses into a dense, suffocating column, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, advancing slowly, each man hard pressed by the man behind him. The arrows keep falling. Some find gaps in armor, slipping under arms, through eye slits, or into the groins. More arrows thud into shields. Shields become heavy porcupines. Men trip. They go down, and they can't get up. There's no space, no leverage, no one to pull them to their feet because everyone is barely standing upright themselves. The fallen become obstacles, and the obstacles become traps. As a French vanguard pushes onward, the weight of the men behind crushes those who stumble in front. At first, it's just cursing, angry shouts, and then it becomes something uglier. You hear gasps, choked cries, and distant screams. Men are pressed chest to back so tightly they can't raise their arms. When one man falls to his knees, the man behind him is shoved over his back, then another, forming a living pile. The bodies are stacked. The men at the bottom feel their ribs creak under the weight, and their lungs cannot expand. They die without a wound, suffocated in a heap of steel, flesh, and mud. This is supposed to be a glorious charge of knights. Instead, it's a slow-motion avalanche of drowning metal. The English watch them come. Step by step is agonizing. The line holds and the stakes stand. King Henry waits. At last, the French reach the English. Not in a full sprint, not in a roaring charge, but in a grim, staggering press. They crash into the English men at arms. With a wet, crunching sound. Not steel on steel, but steel on bone. Mud and bodies. The shields slam together. The men grunt and curse. The line folds, flexes, but it does not break. Behind the English center, the archers wait. Once their quivers are nearly empty, many of them don their small sidearms. Mallets, hatchets, and long knives. These aren't heroic swords. They're tools for close work. And you are one of them. You climb through the stakes, pushing into the scrum at the edges, looking for fallen knights floundering in the mud. You find one. His armor is beautiful, polished, inlaid. The kind of harvest that's crafted by a master. He's on his side, struggling to roll over, hands scrambling in the muck and mud. His visor is closed, and he can't see you. You hear him grasping inside his helmet, every breath with a metallic echo. You grab his visor bar and yank it open. His eyes are wild. You see fear, confusion, and a nobleman who has never imagined dying like this, not in a duel, not with banners flying, but in a ditch, half submerged in filth. He tries to speak, but mud is already creeping into his mouth. You raise your mallet and hit him in the side of the head. The helmet caves in slightly, and he goes still. In the tight, limited space of Agincourt, the sophisticated, chivalric culture of medieval Europe is stripped down to something more primitive. Can you move? Breathe? Stand? If not, you die. Henry knows the numbers are against him. He also knows one thing. There comes a point where too many men on your side becomes a liability. The French have hit that point. Packed together, pushed by their own rear ranks, they can't swing swords properly. They throw short punches with their blades. The angles are bad and the visibility is worse. The English, slightly fewer and less densely packed, can move just a bit more freely. But it's enough. They push, they drive forward, step by step. English men-at-arms fight like butchers. They weren't expecting to survive this day either, so there is no holding back. A sword slams into a visor slit. A dagger is driven under the arm where the steel is thin. A knee crushes into a groin. A shield rim is used like a club, smashing faces. The mud, once a neutral feature of the field, has chosen sides. It's French now. Imagine you're a French knight. You have trained since childhood for this. You have practiced couch lance, the sword, the lance, the etiquette of war. You spent a fortune on your armor, every plate measured, every joint articulated, and now you're lying on your back in a field, unable to roll over. You feel men stepping on you, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. A boot grinds into your chest, another into your forearm. You try to shout, but the mud fills your mouth. Your lungs are burning. You thrash, but the weight of your own gear is pinning you down. You don't die by a gallant blow. You die silently, suffocated, while the battle passes over you. While the front is locked in this horrific press, the Second French battle, The next line of men-at-arms begins to move forward. They see the stall, the chaos, and the piles of men. Some want to hang back, others refuse to lose their chance at glory, and they advance. Instead of reinforcing the attack in an organized way, they add weight to a broken structure. More men push into the back of the vanguard, crushing those already engaged and deepening the suffocation. There is no elegant strategy here anymore, no beautiful choreography of knights and banners. This is a grinder, and the English hold firm. King Henry himself fights in the line, shoulder to shoulder with his men, his throat surcoated muddied, his crown-like helmet indistinguishable in the mess. At one point, a French knight, a duke, nearly reaches him, cutting down several of Henry's bodyguards. The king's brother is badly wounded, and Henry is struck, his helmet dented, and nearly knocked off of his feet. For a moment, the king is just another man in the mud, stunned and dazed. Then, his retainers drag him up, form a wall around him, and the pressure eases as the duke is overwhelmed and killed. Slowly, the French momentum drains away. Their front ranks collapse into heaps, and their second line loses heart. On the flanks, the English archers are now mostly out of arrows. Swarm into the melee like wolves, not heavily armored, not noble, but mobile and vicious. They stomp on hands, stab through visors, and drive knees and knives into the necks. To an observer, it doesn't look like traditional medieval battle. It looks like a mass mugging in a swamp. At last, it happens. The French front line cracks, and then shatters. Small groups try to flee, slipping and skidding backward toward their own line, but they find no solid ground. The field is now a continuous carpet of corpses, dying men, broken weapons, and shattered helmets. English soldiers drag important-looking nobles from the heap as prisoners. Under the rules of medieval warfare, such prisoners are not just captives. They're money. A noble knight, taken alive, can be ransomed for enormous sums, enough to change the life of a simple archer forever. So the English began taking prisoners, in earnest, grabbing anyone with expensive armor, distinctive heraldry, or rich decorated gear. These men are led to the rear, stripped of weapons and guarded. The battle seems won, and that is when the rumor reaches Henry. French horsemen, it's said, are attacking the English baggage train, the rear area where camp followers, servants, wagons, and the sick wounded are kept. For a moment, Henry sees the vision. His lines thin because so many men are escorting prisoners. If a French force hits them now, depleted and reorganizing, the entire battle could flip. All the effort, all the mud, all the dying, undone in a single counterattack. He makes a decision that will haunt his reputation for centuries. He orders the prisoners killed. Not the most valuable nobles. A few of the highest ranked captives are spared, but many others are not. You imagine being one of them. You're surrounded, you've laid down your sword, and you've been promised life in exchange for ransom. You march to the rear and sat in the mud, hands bound, and you hear shouting. The English guards look at each other with wide eyes. They don't want to do this. Killing prisoners goes against the practical instinct, and you're destroying wealth. But the order has come from the king. A man must trust with their lives the same man who has shared their hunger and disease. So, they obey. Knives, sword, axes. Blows delivered to men who can't raise a hand to defend themselves. Some plead, some curse, some try to run, stumbling and falling in their bonds. The killing is not swift and not clean. It's frantic, chaotic. The ugly side of discipline. In the end, the rumored threat to the rear proves minor, and the damage is limited. Historians will argue for centuries whether Henry's order was necessary or an overreaction. But on that day in the mud of Agincourt, hundreds of bound men are cut down because a starving king can't afford even a silver of doubt. This is what victory looks like up close. Not flags, not songs, just more bodies in the mud. By afternoon, the screaming fades. The field is quiet, except for the occasional groan, the distant whining of a wounded horse. The fog has lifted. It reveals a landscape that barely looks human. The French say later that you could walk from one side of the field to the other without touching the ground, and only walking on corpses. The numbers are staggering. Of the French nobility, a terrifying portion is dead. Constable Charles dead, and 3 other dukes all dead. Counts, lords, bannerets dead in heaps, their banners trampled in unrecognizable rags. No one knows the exact numbers, but some people say 6,000 to 10,000 Frenchmen lie dead or missing, many of their nobles. The English, perhaps a few hundred killed, a miracle, or an atrocity, depending on which side of the field you're standing. King Henry walks among the bodies, the mud stuck on his boot. He sees faces that in another world might have sat with him at a negotiation table, men who believed in their armor, birth, and numbers made them invincible. He doesn't gloat, because there isn't a need. The field speaks for him. News travels slowly in the 15th century, but when the story of Agincourt finally spreads, across France, across Europe, into the courts and castles where knights preen and peasants gossip, it carries several truths with it. That a small, sick, starving army shattered a much larger one. That terrain and tactics outweighed glittering armor. That longbows, mud, and exhaustion humbled some of the greatest names in France. Agincourt does not end the 100 Years' War. Far from it. It breaks the illusion of chivalric invincibility. Knights can sink just like anyone else. Armor rusts and horses slip. The glory of the mounted charge, the romantic centerpiece of medieval warfare, is permanently stained with the memory of men choking to death, face down in a plowed field. For the English, Agincourt is a story of almost divine favor. God, they say, was clearly on their side. For the French, it is a national trauma, an entire generation of nobility wiped away in a single morning. Remember Henry's smile at the beginning? The smile of a man who knows he shouldn't be alive? Historically, he should have died at Agincourt. Killed in the crush, captured and ransomed, cut down in a last desperate charge. Instead, he walks off the field as the unquestioned hero of England. He becomes a legend while still very much alive. Plays will be written about him centuries later, speeches put in his mouth that he may never actually give, words about we few, we happy few, that capture the myth, if not the reality. But there is a darker undercurrent. The same man who fought shoulder to shoulder with common archers also ordered helpless prisoners executed. The same king who shared disease and hunger with his men also marched across France like a shadow, leaving burned villages and shattered communities behind him. At Agincourt, heroism and brutality are not opposites. They're neighbors and they share the same tent. Picture the field years later. The bodies are gone. The mud has been plowed again and again. Crops grow on the spot where thousands died. Villagers walk their carts over the ground. Children play where knights once sank. Yet the story remains. Agincourt becomes shorthand for underdog victory, for the danger of arrogance, for the power of terrain and preparation over sheer numbers. But if you strip away the speeches, the banners, the romantic paintings that come later, you find something far more raw at the core. A small army, desperate and sick, taking a stand because they have nowhere else to go. A great army, overconfident and disorganized, stumbling into a trap of its own making. A king willing to gamble everything on a narrow strip of muddy farmland on a gray October morning. And a lot of men who thought they were going to live long enough to tell the tale, lying face down in the dirt instead.